I was born up in the mountains, out where the snakes have legs, where the hoot owls all speak English and the roosters lay square eggs. I shaved my beard and mustache the morning I was born. That night I beat up my old man and drank his rye and corn. Well, I'm a truthful fellow, they call me True Blue Bill. I ain't never told a falsehood, and you bet I never will. I've had some great adventures, I've sailed the 7 seas, I've caught and captured monsters from lions down to fleas. I swam the wide Pacific and walked across the moon. I waded in 40 foot of snow the 31st day of June. Now I'm a truthful fellow, they call me True Blue Bill. I ain't never told a falsehood, and you bet I never will. One time when I was shipwrecked on an island in the seas, by cannibals I was captured and tied up to some trees. They beat and banged their tom-toms and they got rather rough. They said I wouldn't make good steak because I was too tough. Now I'm a truthful fellow, they call me True Blue Bill. I ain't never told a falsehood, and you bet I never will. Now once I was a flyer, and in my aeroplane I flew across to Paris and started back again. When I got halfway back here, that blamed old motor balked. I left that thing just sit up there, and I got out and walked. Now the father of our country, he never told a lie, and he was my great uncle, so I ask you, why should I? An old cowboy and his trusty pal was camped one night at an old corral, looking for dogies with long, slick ears while keeping an eye on the boss's steers. The summer roundup was long since through, and only the winter branding to do. So he snuggled down in his blankets deep, and he soon got warm and was fast asleep. There he dreamed that he walked on them streets of gold, where all around him the angels strolled. The trees and grass was the brightest green, the most beautiful range he'd ever seen. The rivers and creeks were the purest that flows, and it never rains and it never snows. Then he noticed that he was the only one with bat-wing shaps and a big 6 gun. Bat-wing shaps all laced with twang, while all around him the angels sang. So he asked St. Peter if he could be dressed so that he would look like all the rest. They pinned some wings on his old tough hide. He said, I wished I had me some broncs to ride. They gave him a robe and a golden harp, and the frost lay thick on that cowboy's tarp. Now he thumbed that harp and sang a while, then he thought of something that made him smile. Says he, I reckon these wings will do to show wild horses a thing or two. I'll jump a bunch, I'll hoop and shout, I'll kick their tails and fly about. I'll ride one bareback, and if that fails, I'll flop these wings and simply sail. So he hunted wild horses in his dreams, but all he could find was a chariot team that old Elijah had left there. Why, to pick on them it'd be hardly fair. So he sat down beneath a tree and placed his crown upon his knee, watching them angels come and go, fluttering and flying to and fro. One of them lit and began to walk. She came quite close and began to talk. Her teeth was white and her eyes was blue, and her snow-white skin was beautiful too. Her beautiful hair was a golden brown. She is dressed in a flimsy silken gown. Now the cowboy was thrilled with her charms, and he reached out to grasp her in his arms. Stop, she cried, or I'll make complaint to the great white throne and the ruling saint. That cowboy stopped, I must confess, but he couldn't bestow a fond caress. He said, Miss Angel, this is all too bad, but this here country makes me sad. Why, a man can't gamble there's so blame much gold he can pick up more than his clothes will hold. And all this grass a going to seed and not a critter to eat the feed. My Lady Angel, I'll tell you true, this ain't no place for a buckaroo. Then she inquired into his former life and found he'd never possessed a wife. But this Lady Angel, so sweet and nice, she told him she'd been married twice. Both her husbands had been great men, but if she ever married again, she'd have to choose between just two, either a sailor boy or a buckaroo. Then she sat down upon his knees and gave his neck a hearty squeeze. Just then they heard an excited call from the old gray saint on the garden wall. He was flopping his robe and waving his arms till a crowd had gathered in great alarm. The cowboy stood alone and tall before the old gray saint on the garden wall. What's this? The saint of creation cried. How did that feller get inside? Look at that face, a desert brown, and them old bow legs beneath that gown. That's a cowboy, I know him well. They're not allowed even down in hell. He ain't been here but just half a day and already started an angel astray. We just can't let him stay at all, so put him over that garden wall. The saints and angels gave him a start, and he fell towards earth like a falling dart. He couldn't remember just when he hit, 'cause he awoke before he lit. His beautiful dream had gone to grief, so he cooked some biscuits and fried some beef, drank some coffee black and strong, and all that day as he rode along, he thought of that dream with a wicked grin and the old gray saint that had butted in. Now if I had hold of that old saint chap, I'd pull his whiskers and change his map. I'd climb his frame and stomp around, I'd stomp him out of that saintly gown. All of his life as he roamed and toiled, he thought of that dream that saint had spoiled. He never repented nor he never prayed, but he wished to hell had let him stayed. Now old Red was one of the orneriest yet I've seen at the big rodeo. He will bite you, he'll kick you, he'll stomp out your life, and old Red just couldn't be rode. Meaner than sin, wild as the wind that blew on the Montana plains. Old Red was one of the last of a breed, and old Red just couldn't be tamed. From old Idaho a young cowboy came to ride in the big rodeo. This young cowboy's name was Billy McLean, and Billy had never been throwed. Now the greatest desire in young Billy's heart was to ride this old outlaw called Red. He drew him one day, and I heard Billy say, I'll ride him or fall over dead. Old Red was wicked out there in the chute, he was bucking and stomping about. But Billy slid into that saddle with ease, then he said, turn him loose, let us out. Old Red come out with his head on the ground, his hind feet was touching his nose. He was trying to get rid of the man on his back, but the man went wherever he goes. Billy was raking old Red with his spurs from his tail to the tip of his chin. He was doing right well, but Billy could tell this outlaw would never give in. Then old Red went bucking straight for the fence, suddenly stopping, and then he flared on his hind feet and fell on his back, taking poor Billy with him. There was a hush in the crowd, for they knew this would be Billy's last ride. The saddle horn crushed Billy's chest when they fell, and under old Red Billy died. Old Red lay still, no more would he move, the cowboys that seen it could tell. While trying to get rid of the man on his back, old Red broke his neck when he fell. Out in the west they have laid them to rest, the cowboy that couldn't be throwed. And just 1 foot away, resting there in the clay, was the outlaw that couldn't be rode. Now old Tioga Jim was a Paiute slim, a man of forgotten age. Lonesome and sleepy, he lived in a teepee by a water hole out in the sage. A lazy galoot, this greasy Paiute, loving the old traditions, bathed in the glory of ancestral stories of living and dead superstitions. With an iron shillelagh he ruled his mahaley as he called on her for his needs. He lay down the law to that whip-broken squaw, weaving her baskets and beads. All silent and grim was old Tioga Jim as he smoked in his teepee alone, or sipped from a cup in a brush wicky up, or chipped an obsidian stone. Once Jim got his thumb on a bottle of rum, and feeling that he was in luck, he lay on his bunk and he got Injun drunk, a typical old blanket buck. He went on a warpath as an aftermath, and catching sight of his squaw, he gave her a lacing that was really disgracing, a savage caveman in the raw. There appeared on the scene a calm, sedate, mean, souvenir-seeking old patron, who opened her eyes in wild surprise, a shocked old society matron. She broke from her languor in justified anger, and with an all-ireful screech, she wended her way to the midst of that fray, then broke into a clamorous speech. That buck remained mute while she termed him a brute, a beast, and a low, filthy hog, an ignorant savage, the carrion ravage in the paunch of a yeller-cur dog. She said without fail she'd see him in jail and hanged by the neck until dead. Old Jim stood close by with a coal baleful eye. Then he turned to that matron and said, "Now pardon me, please, you appear ill at ease. Perhaps you must think I'm rude. Your chivalrous intent is no doubt well meant, but however I fear you intrude. Recalling some knowledge gained at old Carlisle College, of which I'm a postgraduate, in the home of a peer you must not interfere. Your meddling I can't tolerate. Your chivalrous manner, your falsified banner, your command of the foul epithet, it arouses my ire, and I fear may transpire in allowing me to forget the courtesy due and the relation to your high and haughty veneer, which likes not the flavor of my bestial behavior. Excuse me, but at least I'm sincere. Now were I to chastise you, 'twould surely surprise you, and give me great satisfaction. Ere you get in the whirl of a domestic quarrel, beware the potential reaction. Now our destiny lays in divergent ways, and as for my squaw, well indeed, she takes no recourse in the court of divorce. It's beyond the ken of her creed. Now the blood in our veins is pure like the rains, and has been for numberless ages, while the hybrid white man with his polyglot clan is derived from long virtueless stages. So take your contamination of our civilization, your alcohol, drug, and disease. It allows no excuse for your foul abuse, so remove yourself if you please. We were laying around on the prairie at the Franklin Ranch one night, with our heads up on our saddles and the campfires burning bright, while some were telling stories and others singing songs, and some were lightly smoking as the hours rolled along. When at last we fell to talking of distant friends so dear, when a boy raised his head from his saddle and he brushed away a tear. 'Twas the lone and a painted cottage boy, so far from home I've roamed. I would give my pony and saddle, boys, to be at home, sweet home. His eyes the color of heaven's blue, he wore light wavy hair. We asked him why he had left his home that to him was so dear. Well, he raised up from his saddle and he looked the rough crowd o'er. He said, boys, I'll tell you the reason I left old Kansas shore. I fell in love with a neighbor's girl with eyes of heaven's light, and another fellow loved her too, and it ended in a fight. This fellow's name was Thomas Smith. We had been friends since boys, and we had shared each other's troubles and each other's joys. Well, I never will forget the time when Tom and I first fought. Well, boys, it was an awful fight. I struck him with my knife, and in my dreams I still hear him say as he fell down in despair, "Oh, Bob, oh boy, you're gonna be sorry when you see me lying there." Well, I knelt down beside him and I tried to stop the blood, but the blood that flowed from Thomas's side was a crystal clinging flood. Now, boys, you know the reason why I'm compelled to roam. For the murder of Thomas Smith, boys, I left my home, sweet home. You see this man going down the street with a pickup truck and booted feet. You think he's wealthy, he owns some beef. He's about like your neighbor who's on relief. Sure, he owns a ranch and owns some land, some scrubby cedar and rocks and sand. If the year is good, this I'll allow, 100 acres will feed one cow. You say the price of steak is out of sight. When you were out dining the other night, you paid $14 for 2 sirloin tips, and that includes the drinks you sipped. Now let me tell you from what I know about raising beef and the way they grow. The price of beef would make you pale if a cowman worked on a union scale. Take about 18 hours at time and a half, saving a mother cow and her baby calf. Or 10 hours Sunday at double rate, returning cows through an unclosed gate. Left down by some fellow that didn't care, he saw no reason for it being there. Add 40 cents an hour to his regular pay when he works all night and all next day. Now add some interest and some trucker's freight and the price of feed to get up weight. Now figure our economy is safe and sound. A steer should bring $3 a pound. Now take it easy, don't hit the roof. The price I quote is on the hoof. Old John Norton Duffy was judge in the court in a quaint little town in the west. Although he knew nothing about the rules of the law, as a judge he was one of the best. One night in the winter a murder occurred, and the blacksmith was accused of the crime. They caught him red-handed and tried him in court, and the court found him guilty 3 times. Now Sam was the only good blacksmith we had, and was trying to spare him his life. Judge Duffy rose up like a king in the court and his words then ended the strife. I move we discharge him, we need him in town. Then he spoke out the words that has made him renowned. We have too many strumpets, as everyone knows. I pardon the blacksmith, we'll hang one of those. Come gather round me, cowboys, and listen to me close. I'll tell you about a Mustang that might have been a ghost. Perhaps you've heard of that Mustang. Back in them days they called him steeds. He spent his time with the angels and only come down for feed. He went by the name of the Phantom. He had himself wings for to fly. He'd eat and drink in the Badlands and ranged around in the sky. He used to belong to some outfit, some sisters, the Muse they say, who always kept him in hobbles till he broke them and got away. Now for years they tried hard to catch him, but he kept right on running free. Them riders wore way too much clothing. Them cowboys were knights then, you see. He sure had a bad reputation. I don't know just how it began. Half eagle, half horse, half devil, they say. He was meaner than sin. I was out in that rimrock country, way out by Wild Horse Springs. I like to fell out of my saddle when that bronco sailed in on his wings. I felt like I'd gone crazy as I peered up over the bank, a-watching that albino Mustang preening his wings while he drank. Finally he fills up on water, wings folded, he starts in to graze. I notice he's headed up my way, where I straddle my horse in a daze. I'm all shook up and I'm nervous, my hands are all trembling with hope, but I reaches down on my saddle and I fumble a noose in my rope. Already I ride right out on him, just a spurring and swinging that loop. Before he could start and get going, I threw and it fit like a hoop. I jerks up my slack and I dallies. I turns and my horse throws him neat. He lets out a blood-curdling beller while I'm down hog-tying his feet. I put a hackamore on him and a pair of blinds for his eyes. Then I hobble them wings tight together so he couldn't go up in the skies. I put my saddle on him, that cinch sunk deep in his hide. I taken the slack from my spur straps 'cause it looked like a mighty rough ride. Then I mounts him just like he's plumb gentle. I'm a little bit nervous, you bet. I feel pretty sure I can ride him. I still got them wings hobbled yet. I pull up that blind and he's snorting. He walks like he's walking on eggs. He grunts and explodes like a pistol. I sees at home on his legs. Wolves, grizzlies, panthers, catamounts, scorpions, and such. Women, snakes, and bad whiskey compared to him isn't much. My golly, he keeps getting rougher. He's twisting and sunfishing too. I've got both hands full of leather. I'm weary. I wished he was through. Then he hits the ground with a twister and breaks them wing hobbles there. Before I could loosen and quit him, he's gliding away in the air. He smooths out and keeps right on climbing till way down miles below. I get a look at them mountains. Them peaks are all covered with snow. Up through the clouds now I'm freezing. I'm scared and plumb dizzy to boot. I sure wished I had me that thing folks calls a parachute. Then I might have went crazy. Maybe I went sound asleep. When I woke up I was lying down there on the ground in a heap. You know, he may have had wings like an angel, and he may have been light on his feet, but he should have had horns like the devil and a mouth for eating raw meat. I've lost a good saddle and bridle, a rope, and some other good things. But I'm sure glad to be here to tell you, stay away from that Mustang with wings. I can ride the wildest bronco in the wild and woolly west. I can ride him, I can back him, let him do his level best. I can handle any critter that ever wore a coat of hair, but I had a lively tussle with a stern old grizzly bear. I can rope and throw the wildest steer of that Longhorn Texas brand, and in Injun disagreements I can play a leading hand. But I met up with my master, and it really made me squeal when the boys got me a straddle of that Goldurn Wheel. It was at the Eagle Rancho on the Brazos where I first ran across that blame contrivance that upset me in the dust. Well, it fairly up and threw me, stood me on my cursed head, tamped my back in lighted order, so like the foreman said. It was a tenderfoot that brought it there, his wheeling all the way from Sunlight End of Freedom out to San Francisco Bay. And they tied up at the Ranchhouse for to get outside the meal, not a-thinkin' we would tinker with that Goldurn Wheel. Old Arizona Jim begun it when he said to Jack McGill, some of these boys has pressed the limit, bragging on their riding skill. Still, I reckon there's a puncher not a million miles away who considers he's a rider, though he's tolerably gray. Yet you'll find that he's a tinkerin' with a different sort of deal once he puts them leather leggins o'er that Goldurn Wheel. Now such a slam upon my talent made me madder than a mink, and I told him I could ride him for amusement or for chink. It ain't nothing but a plaything for some kids, and that they might have their ideas sort of shattered if they'd lope that critter out. Well, they held it till I mounted, and I gave the word to go, and the shove they gave to start me, it was not unreasonably slow. Now the grade was sort of slantin' from the ranchhouse to the creek, and we went a gallop-flutin' like a crazy lightning streak. We went a whizzin' and a dartin', first from this side then to that contrivance sort of wobbled like the flying of a bat. Now you could hear the boys a-hollerin', stay with him, Uncle Bill, hit him with those spurs, you sucker, turn his muzzle up the hill. Well, I never made no answer, I just let them cuss a squeal. I was building reputation on that Goldurn Wheel. Holy Moses and his prophets, how we split that Texas air, and the wind it made whip poppers from my somewhat lengthy hair. Then a sort of sneaking eddy came and put my brain to steel, that the devil held a mortgage on that Goldurn Wheel. Then I had a funny feeling as on down that hill we went, there was going to be a crash up that I couldn't well prevent. So I pulled back on the handles, but I couldn't check her up. I sawed and jerked and hollered, but the darn thing wouldn't stop. I have a dim and hazy recollection of the stop. That world got whirling round me and the stars all tangled up. Then there came an intermission which extended till I found I was lying at the ranch house with them boys all gathered round. And a medico was sewing on my skin where it was ripped, and old Arizona said, "Now, boy, I guess you're whipped." Yes, I told him I was busted from my sombrero to my heel. He grinned and says, "You ought to see that Goldurn Wheel." Way out on the western prairie, while riding after stock, a cowboy met a shepherd, attendant of his flock. Now the shepherd asked the cowboy if he'd like to stay and join him in a drink or two and put some grub away. That cowboy says that's mighty fine, and when my belly's full of stew, we'll bury that old tomahawk and have a drink or two. Now that herder cooked up quite a feed, and the cowboy ate his share, and then they got the bottle out and started in from there. "Your liquor's good," that cowboy said, "it really hits the spot." "Help yourself," that herder said, "let's have another shot." So back and forth they passed the jug until they went to sleep, this puncher of the cattle and the herder of the sheep. Now this cowboy slept beneath a sage, and he was awful tight. He tossed and tumbled all about and snored with all his might. His arm fell o'er a triangular hole, and it made that spider mad. He sank his fangs into that arm and gave it all he had. That cowboy woke all sobered up, his arm was swelled and black. He awoken the sheepherder, and they headed for the shack. "That's mighty bad," that herder said. "Looks like your judgment day. If I was in your boots, cowboy, I'd start right in to pray." "I'd like to pray," that cowboy said, "but I just don't know how. I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm going to start right now." He braced himself upon his knees, and raising up his head, he cast his eyes towards heaven, and this is what he said. "Oh God, if you see this poor cowboy, come down here and lend him a hand. Don't send your little son Jesus, 'cause sometimes them boys don't understand. But you see, I'm a damn good bronc rider. I'm a calf-roping son of a gun. It's many a bronco I've ridden. It's many a dollar I've won. I've always been good to my horses, and up till today I ain't never ate sheep. I never did shirk on a roundup. I've always been well worth my keep. I ain't never rustled no cattle. I ain't never took up with a squaw. I ain't never fought less than I had to. Then I never went first for the draw. I live by my creed as I saw it, and I'm only asking what's fair. If you've been keeping the cases, you know what I says on the square. I hate to be a complainin', but it don't seem hardly right for me to be cashin' my chips in over a pot-bellied spider's bite. He slipped up on me while I was sleepin', and he bit me while I was drunk. I hate to keep complainin', but man, that's the trick of a skunk. Why, if I'd have been hurt riding a bronco or roping a steer, don't you see, I wouldn't be here complainin'. I'd feel like 'twas comin' to be. I never was strong on sky pilots. There ain't no place on them much to lean. They ain't a whole lot better than I am. That is, if you know what I mean. Well, I'm using a lot of your time, I guess. I just don't know how to pray. I won't ever ask any more favors if you'll find time to help me today. Now that was the prayer of a cowboy, a prayer that was frank and sincere, as he called on his God as he saw him to lend him a listening ear. That cowboy's God must have heard him out there on the range that day, 'cause he healed that suffering rider and sent him along on his way. Well, now, Mr. Boomer Johnson was a getting old in spots, but you wouldn't think a bad man go to wrestling pans and pots. He done his share of killing, and his draw was getting slow, so he quit to punching cattle, and he took to punching dough. Well, the foreman up and hired him, thinking time had rode him tame, but a snake don't get no sweeter by the changing of his name. But Boomer knew his business, he could cook to make you smile, but he hustled up the fodder in the most peculiar style. Well, he never used no matches, left them laying on the shelf, with some kerosene and cursing, then the kindling lit itself. And let me tell you, mister, it would give you quite a jolt just to see him stir frijoles with the muzzle of his Colt. Now, killing folks and cooking ain't so terrible for a part, so I guess that's why old Boomer kept a-practicing at his art. With the front side of a pistol, he could cut a pilot slick, and he rolled it with the barrel just to make the edges stick. He built his donuts solid, and it really curl your hair to see him punch a donut when he threw it in the air. He'd shoot a hole plumb center every time that pistol spoke, till the can was full of donuts and the shack was full of smoke. Now the boys were getting jumpy, and he couldn't understand why his shooting made 'em nervous when his cooking was so grand. He kept right on performing, and it came as no surprise when he took to making tombstones on the covers of his pies. Well, they didn't taste no better, and they didn't taste no worse, but sitting at his table was like riding in a hearse. You didn't do no talking, and you took just what you got, and you ate till you was foundered just to keep from getting shot. Us at breakfast one fine morning, I was feeling mighty low, when old Boomer passed the donuts, and I says, well, thank you, no. All I take this trip is coffee, 'cause my stomach 'tis a wreck. You could see the urge for killing swell the veins along his neck. Scarney's grubby strings some donuts on the muzzle of his gun, and he pokes it in my belly, and he says, you're taking some. He was set to start a graveyard, but for once he was mistook. Me not wanting any donuts, I just up and salt the cook. Did they fire him? Listen, mister, there was nothing left to fire, just a row of smiling faces and another cook to hire. If he's working for some outfit now and a cooking what I mean, it is where there ain't no matches and they don't have kerosene. I was born way up in them mountains beneath a lonesome pine, where the quaking asp grows thick as hell, and so does that old grapevine. I've hunted saddle horses through valley, hill, and dale, till I've wore out my eyes a-hunting tracks and my ears a-listening for bells. Now, cowboying used to be a pleasure when there's a lot of real good hands and a lot of real good horses that seemed to know their brands. We rode them bucking ponies, we talked about Billy the Kid, we popped them maidens' coattails after the sun was hid. When the roundup was over, it's into town we'd go. We'd take a drink of whiskey, maybe a dozen or so. Them bartenders, they all knew us, and the women would ask us in. What we once called a pleasure, they now call a sin. But my old life's seen many changes since I've come upon this soil. There ain't nothing left but heartache. I'm lonesome like a toil. I'm all by my lonesome, live up here in a tent. Another year has come and gone that seems damn poorly spent. I roll out my old bedroll, it's neither soft nor warm. It's never felt the presence of a woman's lovely farm. But then I guess the cards will change, or at least that's what I think, and I'll have a pretty woman and a lot of booze to drink. Or else I'll go into old Mexico, and there I'll buy some mescal, and either join the Mormons or marry a Mexican gal. But it's farewell to old Hell's Canyon and its God-forsaken life, where I live up here in the mountains with a pack mule for a wife. Well, a soldier kissed his wife goodbye, he was going to the war, and the tears come trinkling down his cheeks for the one he did adore. Be faithful unto me, he said, my own true loving bride, and at the battle of Bull Run he like a soldier died. And he never came back, he never came back, his dear face she never saw more. But happy she'll be when his face she does see, when they meet on that beautiful shore. Well, I walked into a restaurant as hungry as a bear, and like a raving maniac I seized the bill of fare. The waiter says, "What will you have?" "Bring me a steak," I say. He took my order, lowered his head, and slowly walked away. And he never came back, he never came back. I waited an hour or more, but his head I will break if he don't have that steak when we meet on the beautiful shore. Well, an old maid of 45 madly fell in love with a young kid of 17, he called her Turtle Dove. The wedding day was set at last, the birds did gaily sing. He touched her for 100 and went out to buy the ring. And he never came back, he never came back. His dear face she never saw more. But the dear little thing will sure have that ring when they meet on that beautiful shore. When Barnum and Bailey come to town, I took me mother-in-law. She laughed at everything she saw until she broke her jaw. The big balloon outside the tent, it proved to be my friend. I put her in and cut the rope, and up she did ascend. And she never came back, she never came back. High up in the air she did soar. I was happy that night that she was clear out of sight until we meet on that beautiful shore. Well, I come into this country and my horses they were fine, but I lost 'em in the forest in these dern jack pines. Come a tie-ya, yippee yippee yay, yippee yay, come a tie-ya, yippee yippee yay. Well, I started turning over the Claytown grass with a 2-bit plow and a damn jackass. Come a tie-ya, yippee yippee yay, yippee yay, come a tie-ya, yippee yippee yay. Well, it wasn't very long till that burro went lame. I looked in my bin and I was out of grain. Come a tie-ya, yippee yippee yay, yippee yay, come a tie-ya, yippee yippee yay. Well, I sold my burro and I threw away the plow, and now I've got nothing but an old milk cow. Come a tie-ya, yippee yippee yay, yippee yay, come a tie-ya, yippee yippee yay. Well, a little bit of cane and a little bit of corn, that's about all you raise on a Claytown farm. Come a tie-ya, yippee yippee yay, yippee yay, come a tie-ya, yippee yippee yay. I feed her a wagon load of fodder, about a ton of hay, and I carry about a pint of milk away. Come a tie-ya, yippee yippee yay, yippee yay, come a tie-ya, yippee yippee yay. Well, I sold that cow and that wreck of a barn, and I bid farewell to that Claytown farm. Come a tie-ya, yippee yippee yay, yippee yay, come a tie-ya, yippee yippee yay. Sometimes in the hush of the evening, when the winds grow tired and still, by my fire I sit dozing and dreaming, letting memories bring back what they will. I hear a cry of mush as a whip licks out and cracks like the shot of a gun. There's a Malamute team coming straight towards me. 8 dogs, they're all on the run. That leader is big and he comes running low, pulling that sleigh with a will. Time never can dim my memory of him, my lead dog, Big Wicked Bill. That driver seems worried as he hurries that team, and in fear he keeps looking back. And as night closes in, he hears it again. It's the cry of a killer wolf pack. Then them northern lights comes out to play, like fingers they feel for the sky. That driver yells, "Mush to that weary team, it's mush or we've all got to die." The moon looks down on that race of death at that wolf pack closing in. The driver knows should his lead dog fall, that battle's over for him. Till his rifle is empty, he holds them off. Then unafraid they close in for the kill. And the driver knows his life depends on the fangs of old Big Wicked Bill. But still pulling strong, Big Bill fights them off, right up to the cabin door. I get him inside, I soon realize, well, Big Bill won't fight anymore. Wicked? Yes, that's what I named him when he was a pup. Wicked, 'cause he loved so to fight. But because he stood off that killer wolf pack, I lived through a horrible night. Now, if you've never owned a big Malamute, then perhaps you just don't understand. This longing I get, especially at night, just to feel his big head in my hand. So now in the hush of the evening, when the winds grow tired and are still, by my fire I sit waiting for memories to call, hoping they'll bring Big Wicked Bill. You may look at the picture that hangs on the wall, and then at the arrow that's hanging close by. Say, tell me a story, if it's one that you know, of a horse I once owned down in old Mexico. He was fleet as an arrow and black as a crow, with a star in his forehead as white as the snow. His arched neck was hidden by a thick flow of mane, and they called him Patonia, the pride of the plains. Now the settlers were few and the soldiers were scarce, and the Indians on the warpath were savage and fierce. When the captain called us up, he said someone must go for help from the border of New Mexico. Well, a dozen brave fellows was standing right near, when the captain he saw me, I standing right here. Patonia was with me, his nose in my hand. They said, boy, your horse is the best in the land. You're fit for that ride, you're the lightest man here. On the back of that Mustang, you've nothing to fear. Well, they all shook my hand as I mounted his back, and down the black pathway I headed his tracks. Well, the black struck a trot, and he kept it all night, till just as the east was beginning to light. Then right in behind me I heard a fierce yell, and I knew that the Indians was riding my trail. I leaned in my stirrup, shook the bells on his reins. I tapped his neck softly, and I called him by name. Well, he answered my call with the toss of his head. His black body lengthened as onward he sped. And when on those Indians I was starting to gain, well, right through my left leg I felt a sharp pain. Well, the flowing red blood, it shot forth from Pat's side, but the black never shortened his powerful stride. Now that is the arrow that hangs on the wall. It was shot through my left leg, boot, stirrup, and all. On many fine horses I've since pulled the reins, but there's none like Patonia, the pride of the plains. I was on a driving 80 working under Silver Jack, who's now in jail in Jackson and ain't soon expected back. Now there was a man among us by the name of Robert White. He was smart and cute and tonguey. Guess he was a graduate. He could talk on any subject, from the Bible down to Hoyle. His words flowed out as slick and smooth as if they's made of oil. One day we was all camped out in that God-forsaken land, smoking niggerhead tobacco and a hearing Bob expand. Hell, he said it was a humbug, and he made it plain as day that the Bible was a label. We all vowed it looked that way. Miracles and such like was too rank for him to stand, and as for him they called the Savior, hell, he's just a common man. You're a liar, someone shouted, and you got to take it back. We turned our heads all startled. 'Twas the words of Silver Jack. He cracked his fists together, and he staked his duds and cried. It was in that same religion that my mother lived and died. And though I haven't always used the Lord exactly right, yet when I hear things about him, a man's got to eat his words or fight. Now old Bobby wasn't cowardly, and he answered bold and free. Stake your duds and cut your capers, man, there ain't no flies on me. Now they fought for 40 minutes, and that crowd would hoop and cheer, when Jack spit up a tooth or two and Bobby lost an ear. At last Jack got him under, and he nailed him once or twice. Right soon Bob started to admitting the divinity of Christ. But Jack kept reassuring him till he made that poor cuss yell. Bob vowed he'd been mistaken in his views concerning hell. When the fierce encounter ended, they raised up from the ground. Someone brought a bottle out and kindly passed it round. We drank to Bob's religion in a friendly sort of way, and the cry of infidelity was checked in camp that day. Now a brave young lad was Terry Sloan, a stranger to most fears. A bronco's neigh and a bullet's drone was music to his ears. But one thing upon the range that caused his blood to freeze, and that was the angry drone of hornets, wasps, and bees. We punchers of the bucking ram were sent one day to build a modern irrigation ditch where the snowdrift water spills. We flung our scant equipment down upon the mossy rocks, when here come Terry fresh from town, and he carried a wooden box. And just as he put his foot atop the nearest crest, I seen him stick his foot into a yeller jacket's nest. The insects swarmed about his head on angry buzzing wings. It was then we thought of Terry's fear of bugs that carried stings. Says Pete McCroll, a bet $5 he drops that box and runs. Says Shorty Long, I'll take you up, and strangely Shorty won. For heedless of that whining horde, he established him a crown. He carried that box across the ford, and he laid her gently down. Such bravery deserved a cheer, we whooped most heartily. But what had conquered Terry's fear was more than we could see. Said Shorty as he shucked his socks in camp that very night, I knew he wouldn't drop that box, it was full of dynamite. He was born up high in the mountains on the sunny side of a hill. There was snow on the shady spots and bones of a winter's kill. He was nudged to his feet by his mother. Her ribs showed through her hide. She was a rugged kind of bronc that wouldn't be broken to ride. As days went by, the grass turned green. He would always romp and play. Then they joined a band of horses led by a dappled gray. They would run many times in the summer when his heart would beat with fear. When up against the horizon a rider would appear. Then one day he made a mistake. When he's paying for today, he never stayed by his mother's side, but he followed the dappled gray. They were going down a rocky hill. He thought there'd be a wreck. And then a circling loop came down, jerked tight upon his neck. He was taken where there were people, put in a big corral, tied to a post with a big long rope. He knew that this was hell. Now that was many years ago. He's since been broken to ride, but he still misses his mother and hates the brand on his side. Then at night when his ride is through and he has ate his fill, he stands there always facing south. He loves them barren hills. Now we let our pony take us to a town in Lower Pecos, where the high bridge spans the canyons thin and fine. He was born one day in Tioga, where he learned to be a lawyer, and the preacher and the doctor and the mayor. He was cook and old shoe mender, sometimes preacher and bartender, and it cost 6 bits to have him cut your hair. He was jolly, he was merry, he would drink a Tom and Jerry, and mixing up an eggnog he was grand. He was right smart of a hustler, and considered as a rustler, and occasions on a roundup took a hand. There was once Roy had no money, and it wasn't very funny, nor neither was it very strange nor rare. So he went to help Pap winded, but he got so absent-minded that he put his RB brand on old Pap's steer. Old Pap being right smart angry, Roy Bean rode into Langtree, where he set him up an office and a store. You could buy a drink or a button, or your neighbor rancher's mutton, but the latter made the other fellow sore. There was once they found a dead man, who in life had been a red man, and they called Roy Bean to view the body first. He took a drink of toddy, then rode out to view the body, and he lifted all the things that dead man had. For a red man he was phony, 'cause he had a pretty pony, a dandy bit and saddle and a rope. He had a Navajo rug, and a quart was in his jug, and a pony that was easy on the lope. Well, to find it was quite rare-o, for he was a Cusinero whose payday hadn't been so far away. Says Roy Bean, you'll learn a lesson, 'cause you pack a Smith & Wesson, and to carry implements of war is wrong. $40 I'll just fine you, 'cause I can't very well confine you, for already you've been laying around too long. Well now, boys, you've heard the story of Roy Bean in all his glory, the man who was the justice of the law. He was handy with his books, and he was homely in his looks, and right now I'm not a-tellin' any more. Now the poker chips was a-clinking in a camp called Buckskin Joe. All the eyes were on the waddy who had the dough. And a-sitting at the table was the famous Henry Dean, a rougher, tougher hombre this camp had never seen. By the door there stood a stranger, and we noticed when he come, You could tell by the looks of him that he only had one lung. Said old Henry to this stranger, it's no wonders I'm losing tonight, with that ugly scarecrow like you a-standing in my light. Said old Henry to this stranger, you don't know who I am. No, replied the stranger, and I don't give a damn. All the boys around the table dropped their cards and held their breath, 'cause talk like this to Henry Dean was flirting with sudden death. But it didn't scare the stranger, as Henry himself could see, so he commenced to read out loud some of his pedigree. Now the lions in the mountains, I ride them to their dens, while the bears down in the canyons, I choke and wrestle them. The centipedes and scorpions, they never mar my hide. A rattlesnake once bit me, but he crawled away and died. I am like the untamed bronco that roams out on the plains. I've got hair in my upper teeth and wild blood in my veins. Well, the stranger took that 5 of hearts and pinned it on the wall, turned his back and walked away 50 feet in all. He turned around as he made his draw, and he fired 5 shots in all, and with each shot there fell a spot from the card up on the wall. And then he turned to old Henry, and here's what I heard him say: I've got 1 cartridge left, old man, if you want to call my play. In an Arizona graveyard, not too many miles away, there lies the bones of Henry Dean, but the stranger's here to stay. A Texas cowboy lay on a barroom floor, having drank so much he could drink no more. So he fell to sleep with a troubled brain, to dream that he rode on that hellbound train. That train with murderous blood was damp, and was brilliantly lit by a brimstone lamp, while a nymph for fuel was shoveling bones, and the engine lurched with 1,000 groans. The boiler was filled with lager beer, and the devil himself was the engineer. Now the passengers was a most motley crew, church member, atheist, Gentile, and Jew, rich men in broadcloth, beggars in rags, pretty young ladies, withered old hags, red men, yellow men, black, brown, and white, all chained together. Lord, what a sight! As that train rushed on at an awful pace, the sulphur fumes scorched their hands and face. Wilder and wilder the country grew, and faster that engine flew. Louder and louder the thunder crashed, and brighter the lightning flashed. Hotter and hotter the air became, till the clothes was seared from each quivering frame. Then out of the distance there rose a yell. Ha ha, said the devil, we're nearing hell. And then how them passengers shrieked with pain, and begged the devil to stop that train. But he capered about and danced with glee, and laughed and joked at their misery. My faithful friends, you have done your work, and the devil can never a payday shirk. You've bullied the weak, you've cheated the poor, your starving brother you've turned from your door. You've laid up gold where the canker rusts, and you've give free vent to your hell-bound lust. You've justice scorned and corruption sown, and trampled the laws of nature down. You've robbed, cheated, plundered, and lied, and mocked at God in your hell-bound pride. My faithful friends, you've done your work, and the devil can never a payday shirk. Why, the laborer always expects his hire, so I'll land you safe in a lake of fire, where your flesh will waste in them flames that roar, and my imps will torment you forevermore. Then the cowboy woke with an anguished cry, his shirt wet with sweat, and his hair standing high. He prayed as he never had prayed till that hour, to be saved from his sins and the demon's power. His prayers and vows were not in vain, 'cause he never rode that hell-bound train. I have summered in the tropics with that yellow fever chill. I have been down with the scurvy, I've had every ache and ill. I have wintered in the Arctic where I was frostbit to the bone. I was in a Chinese dungeon once and spent a year alone. I was shanghaied on a whaler and was stranded in the deep, but I never knew what misery was till I took to herding sheep. That ranch boss, he is 2 weeks late, that burro's been dead 3 days. Them dogs are all sore-footed, but them sheep have got to graze. They won't bed down till after dark, they're up before the dawn. With their battin' and their blattin', they are scattered and they're gone. My boots wore out, my feet is sore, I think I'll never mend. I have got to where a horny toad looks like a long-lost friend. That Spanish Inquisition would have been a darn sight worse. Instead of crucifixion, they'd have had some sheep to nurse. Old Jib had lots of patience, yet he got off mighty cheap. He never knew what misery was, 'cause he never did herd sheep. It's nice to tell them little kids about the big old horny ram, about that soft-eyed mother ewe and the woolly little lamb. It's nice to have your mutton chops and woolen clothes to wear. Did you ever stop to give a thought about the fool that put them there? Now blessed are the sick and blind, the cripples too that creep. They'll never know what misery is, 'cause they never will herd sheep.